Welcome to our deep dive into Iranian history. We'll
Yeah.
be looking at ancient Persia, Islamic Persia, and the modern era. It's going to be a fascinating journey as we uncover those layers that shape modern-day Iran, everything from, Cyrus the Great to the Safavids,
Yeah.
and of course the 20th century and all the drama that came with it.
Yeah, it's a history full of both continuity and change, and understanding how those threads weave together is key to really understanding Iran's place in the world.
Absolutely. Well, let's start then with ancient Persia, specifically the Achaemenid-empire. This was founded by Cyrus the Great around 550 BCE, and he had this, legendary reputation as a very tolerant, very skilled administrator.
And his tolerance, it wasn't just like a personal thing, it was really strategic to how he ruled. So instead of saying everyone has to be the same, have the same culture, he actually allowed conquered peoples to keep their customs, their religions, as long as, of course, they stayed loyal, they paid their taxes. And this approach really helped stabilize the empire, a vast multi-ethnic empire. It meant fewer rebellions. And there's a great example of this, the Cyrus Cylinder. It's a clay document that was found in Babylon. And it basically outlines his policies on religious freedom and even on repatriating people who'd been exiled. A lot of people see this document as one of the first charters of human rights. It really reflects how innovative Cyrus was in governing.
That's incredible. I mean, this multi-ethnic empire stretched from the Mediterranean all the way to the Indus Valley. How on earth did they maintain control over such a huge territory?
The Achaemenids, they were pioneers when it came to administration. They created this system, the satrapy system. Basically, they divided the empire into provinces. Each one was ruled by a satrap, who was like a local governor. They were in charge of taxes, keeping the peace, and raising troops when needed. So it was this decentralized way to rule, really efficient. And to connect all of these different regions, they built the Royal Road. It was massive, over 1,600 miles. An amazing piece of engineering that allowed for communication, trade, troop movement, really helped solidify the empire's power.
Wow. That's incredible. Talk about administrative prowess.
Yeah.
Now, alongside these innovations, there's Zoroastrianism, which became very central to Persian culture. For those who might not be familiar, could you break down the core ideas of this religion?
Zoroastrianism, it's an ancient monotheistic religion, and it centers around Ahura Mazda, the supreme god who represents truth and light. A key part of it is this idea of ethical dualism. There's this constant fight between good and evil, and humans have to choose through their thoughts, their words, their actions to be on the side of good. This emphasis on ethical conduct, personal responsibility, it really permeated Persian society. And, while the Achaemenid kings were tolerant of other faiths, they did actively promote Zoroastrianism. It kind of created this shared cultural identity, even within this very diverse empire.
It's fascinating how religion can play that unifying role. Now, under Darius the First and Xerxes the Third, the empire really hit its peak, leaving behind these awe-inspiring legacies.
Oh, absolutely. Like Darius the First, he built Persepolis, a magnificent capital, showed off the empire's wealth and architectural skills. But Persepolis wasn't just about looking grand. Its location and design projected power. And it was this place where delegations from all across the empire could meet. Darius also standardized the currency. He moved them away from bartering and created a unified coinage system. This really boosted trade and economic stability. Plus, it highlighted their influence across the ancient world.
So they really solidified this image of a powerful, sophisticated empire. But of course, like all empires, the Achaemenids eventually declined.
Yes, in 330 BCE, they fell to Alexander the Great, and that ushered in the Hellenistic Seleucid dynasty. This period brought a lot of cultural exchange between Persian and Greek traditions.
Right. But what's so interesting is that even after Alexander, the Persian spirit didn't just disappear. It came back strong with the Sassanid Empire in 224 CE.
Exactly. The Sassanids, they saw themselves as the true heirs of the Achaemenids. They wanted to restore that glory, so they brought back Zoroastrianism, built this strong administrative system based on their predecessors. But they weren't just focused on the past, they were a major force in the region. They had these intense rivalries with the Roman and Byzantine empires.
Wow, so a lot of power struggles, a lot of cultural dynamism going on. How did these power struggles actually shape Persian culture?
It had a huge impact. The rivalry with Rome and Byzantium pushed them to innovate militarily. They built powerful armies, but it also made them more aware of their own Persian identity. They wanted to be distinct from their rivals. So we see this flourishing of Persian art, architecture, philosophy, and this really laid the groundwork for their influence on later Islamic periods. For example, they developed a unique architectural style, monumental vaulted structures, elaborate decorations. This style would later be a big influence on Islamic architecture, especially mosques and palaces.
That's incredible. So this really sets the stage for another big shift in Iranian history, the arrival of Islam in the 7th century.
When we think about Islam arriving in Persia in the 7th century, it's often seen as this sudden break. But it's more nuanced than that. It wasn't just one culture being completely replaced by another.
Right, right. And that's where we see the resilience of Persian culture. I mean, even with this massive shift, Persian identity wasn't wiped out.
Yeah.
So how did they adapt? And what was their role in actually shaping Islamic civilization?
The Persians, they had these rich intellectual traditions, their administration skills, and they became really key players in how Islamic civilization developed. They didn't just adapt, they actively shaped it. Take the Abbasid Caliphate, for example. They came to power in the 8th century. And Persian administrators, scholars, poets, they had a lot of influence in this caliphate. Their contributions really helped create this golden age of scholarship, science, and the arts in the Islamic world.
So it's more like the intertwined with the new faith, leading to this incredible period of creativity and intellectual growth?
Exactly. Persian became this major language of literature and administration across the Islamic world. Think of someone like Rumi, the Sufi mystic and poet. His poetry, written in Persian, is a beautiful example of that fusion. Islamic spirituality meeting Persian literary traditions.
It really highlights how dynamic these cultural and religious influences can be. And then, within Islamic Persia, we see Shia Islam emerging, which becomes such a central part of Iranian identity. What were the main differences between Shia and Sunni Islam, and why did Shia Islam have such a strong appeal to Persians?
One of the core differences is about succession after the Prophet Muhammad died. Sunni Muslims believed that the rightful successors, the caliphs, were chosen by the community. But Shia Muslims believed that leadership should have gone directly to Ali, the Prophet's cousin and son-in-law, and then down his line. It's this idea of divinely appointed leadership, the imate, that's central to Shia Islam.
And you said this idea resonated with the Persian context. What was that connection?
This idea of a divinely guided leader, an imam, it had echoes of the old Persian idea of kingship, where the ruler was seen as having this sacred connection to the divine. Plus, the emphasis on justice and fighting oppression within Shia Islam. That appealed to a lot of Persians. They saw it as a way to challenge those in power, especially during times of political turmoil.
So Shia Islam really became woven into the Persian worldview, setting them apart from their Sunni neighbors. And this distinction becomes even more pronounced with the Safavid dynasty in the 16th century.
Right. The Safavids, a dynasty of Shia rulers, they made Shia Islam the official religion, and that cemented it as this cornerstone of Iranian identity and how they were governed. This had huge religious and geopolitical implications. It created a distinct Shia power in a region where most empires were Sunni, leading to both conflict and cultural exchange.
So this wasn't just about religious change. The Safavid era was this time of amazing artistic and cultural achievements, too.
Absolutely. They oversaw this cultural renaissance, advancements in Persian literature, art, architecture. They built on those rich artistic traditions that came before, blending them with new influences to create this distinctive Safavid style.
And which rulers were really key in shaping this cultural flourishing?
Shah Abbas I. He ruled from 1588 to 1629, and he's considered one of the most influential Safavid rulers. He centralized power, reformed the military, boosted trade, it brought stability and prosperity. He was also big on those grand architectural projects. He transformed Isfahan into this magnificent capital.
Yeah, his architectural achievements are definitely a lasting symbol of that era. But, like all empires, the Safavids eventually declined, and that led Iran into a new phase of its history.
In the 18th century, the Safavids declined. That paved the way for the Qajar-dynasty. They ruled Iran from 1789 to 1925. This period is a real turning point. We start to see the growing influence of Western powers on Iran, and that's something that'll really shape the modern era.
And that brings us closer to understanding the Iran we see today, all those forces that shaped its present. So as we move into the Qajar dynasty and the modern era, there's this noticeable shift, right? External forces, especially Western powers, start playing a much bigger role in Iran's story.
Yeah, the 19th and early 20th centuries were pretty turbulent times for Iran. The Qajar rulers, they were dealing with a lot. Internal conflicts, pressure from Britain and Russia both wanting to control the region. It was this constant struggle to modernize while also losing territory, losing their own sovereignty.
It must have been incredibly difficult for the Qajar rulers to handle all of that, both inside and outside the country.
Yeah, it really was. They were trying to hold on to stability, hold on to their power, but there was so much pressure. And then in the early 20th century, oil was discovered in Iran. That just made things even more complicated.
Because it brought even more attention from those foreign powers. Everyone wanted to control that valuable resource.
Exactly. It's like a pattern throughout history, right? The discovery of oil brings potential wealth, but it also brings unwanted attention, exploitation.
Right. And Iran's a perfect example of that.
Definitely. The desire to control Iranian oil, it was a big factor in things like the Anglo-Persian Agreement of 1919. That basically turned Iran into a British protectorate.
Wow. But that agreement, it didn't go through, did it?
No, it didn't. There was a lot of opposition within Iran, and it was never actually ratified.
So there was pushback against these Western powers.
Oh, yeah. There were Iranian nationalists, intellectuals who were very vocal against foreign influence. People like Mohammad Mossadegh, he became a key figure, advocating for nationalizing Iranian oil, giving Iran more control over its own destiny.
And Mossadegh, his name is tied to what happened in 1953, a turning point in Iranian history. Can you talk more about his role and why this event was so significant?
Well, Mossadegh, as prime minister, he was instrumental in nationalizing the Iranian oil industry in 1951. This was huge, incredibly popular in Iran, but of course Western powers saw it as a threat, especially Britain. They had a lot invested in Iranian oil. And so in 1953, you have this coup orchestrated by the CIA with British support. They overthrew Mossadegh's government, a democratically elected government, and they brought back the Shah, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, who had fled the country.
That 1953 coup, it really had long-lasting consequences, didn't it? How did it shape Iranian politics?
It really did. The coup fueled this resentment toward the West, this feeling that they were meddling in Iranian affairs. And this feeling only grew in the decades that followed. The Shah's return, it started this period of rapid modernization, industrialization. They called it the White Revolution. But his policies, they were often really authoritarian. He didn't care much about traditional social structures or anyone who disagreed with him.
So progress, but at a cost. It sounded like there was this growing gap between what the Shah wanted and what a lot of Iranians wanted.
Exactly. The Shah was close to the West. He cracked down on any opposition. And his social reforms, a lot of people saw them as attacking traditional values. There was this growing discontent. And it was made worse by economic inequality. People felt like the benefits of modernization weren't being shared fairly.
And these tensions finally boiled over in the 1979 Iranian Revolution, a truly transformative event.
The revolution, it came from this mix of social, economic, and religious grievances, and it was led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a charismatic religious leader who'd been exiled by the Shah. Khomeini's message, it resonated with so many different groups in Iranian society. It brought them together against the Shah's regime.
So unlike the 1953 coup, this revolution came from within, fueled by the people.
Absolutely. The 1979 revolution, it was a real mass movement. It showed the power of the people. It brought down the monarchy and established the Islamic Republic. It was this unique system, combining elements of theocracy and a republic.
It really changed how Iran was governed and how society functioned.
For sure. With the Islamic Republic, Shia Islam became central to the government and to society, and that has had a profound impact on Iranian identity, something we still see today.
We've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into Iranian history, from those ancient empires to the blending of cultures in the Islamic period, and then to the events of the 20th century that brought us to the Iran we know now.
It has been fascinating. Iran's history shows how complex cultural evolution is, the interplay of tradition and change, the lasting power of ideas and beliefs.
Definitely. And as we wrap up, there's one big question. How will this rich and often turbulent past shape Iran's future? How will it impact its role on the world stage? That's something for all of us to think about as we continue to learn about this complex and fascinating nation.